Well, welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. I've got Bridget Chirigos here. Did I pronounce it right? Chirigos?
Yes, you did.
Yes. That is a tricky Greek name, I believe. So it was Chirigos Designs, and we've worked together now for a couple of years on a couple of big projects and a couple smaller remodels. And so thanks for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Let's get right into it. Basically, design. You have quite a background. So maybe I'd like to hear about that actually for myself, but as well as our listeners. Tell me in 5 minutes or so, give me your origin story. I know you're kind of from Texas, but and we'll dive into some of these. Kind of. Well,
just a little bit.
Take it from here. I want to hear about it.
So, from Texas, and I just went back to my passion in 2009. I looked at my husband and said, I just wanted to design. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't plan. I didn't have a mission. I just started really decorating more. But I immediately, within the first year, fell into remodels, and I fell in love with it. And came alongside some local builders, and it boomed from there. I was raising my son, so I was home. I had a home office. I didn't have a studio, but we got so busy, so I did hire an assistant to help me, and we kind of navigated the whole thing. And I just created it. I created processes. I saw some of the challenges early on. And so in 2015, my husband's job was transferred up to Minneapolis, and that was a little shocker. We didn't even know how to blow out our irrigation system, okay? They need a Southerners Moving to Minnesota 101 book.
Did you freeze your lines, or did someone tell you?
We almost did.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
Yeah.
But no, the people were great. We immediately fell in love with the Twin Cities. We did. I don't know. It felt right. And then my husband's job ended within 2 years. And so we were we felt like we were supposed to stay here. And so we went big, and with his support, we opened up the studio in 2018. And I started cold calling builders.
That's amazing. How did you, out of curiosity, and we'll go back to the origin in a minute, but how did you find that experience of cold calling? How did you introduce yourself? How did you get on people's radar? Because once you're I can speak for myself, you being someone now that is kind of on our inner circle, I get called in a lot by other interior designers, and they're very talented, but kind of like a racing stable, I can only have so many thoroughbreds that I can race.
Right.
And once you get very comfortable, we'll talk about that a little bit later about the process, you really respect the other person. You find a good fit not only for your builder but for your clientele. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's got to be hard to break in with new builders when you have established relationships, or did you find it not as difficult that a lot of people were willing to sit down and meet with you?
I found openness here. I really did. And I think it's because I just spoke truth of my passion. I love to improve their process, not impede it. I love to work alongside them. And I was vulnerable. I was willing to just say, throw me your smallest project. And I will dig in and understand your process, get to know your subs, get to know the people that are actually building the craftspeople, not staying in a box. I wasn't, of course, the client is the most important, but, and I just said, give me a try. And I think I spoke their language, and, I'm willing to throw on boots and get in there. And I always said that, if a builder calls me, it's important, right? But if the tile installer calls me, it's critical.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a good phrase.
Yeah. You have to be on call. And I wanted them to know that, because they're the experts. And I'm also willing and open. I don't think I know everything. I have to know a lot about a lot, but I'm not an expert in all of it. So it takes that team. So I think that really, I wasn't coming in with a diva mind, of going, oh, well, give me your, whatever. So I think you just have to, people want to work with people they like. And people want to work with people that know that they're going to be respected, So I got my first project. And cold calling, well, it was from my hated one job that I had to cold call for 2 years, and I hated it. But it taught me so much about cold calling. And so I think also, too, when you are in a situation, with your family and you have to be, step up, it just kind of adversity creates this advantage where you just get your determination and grit and just get on the phone.
Mm-hmm. How much of your experience in Texas translated to Minnesota? I know they're different markets. Going back to, I guess, the original question of how you got started, I'm kind of curious because you hear about it. What is, in your words, the difference between decorating and design? Because I have some preconceived notions about the two words, but I'd be curious from a designer, how do you view those two words?
Oh, yeah, there is a gray area. Mm-hmm. Decorating, I think, where I started is, color and scale and more of the decorative finishes. The paint colors on the cabinets and on the walls and furniture or hardware, lighting. But when it gets into design, that's really when you can see around the corners of knowing, okay, what are the codes? How big is that light fixture need to be? What do the electricians need? Little things like the size of back plates. Mm-hmm. Are important because you don't want to cut a 6-inch hole for a 4-inch backplate, right? And then, especially putting it on tile. So that, I think, is that lesson. And then if you're willing to embrace it and learn it and know it and breathe it and continue to learn it and come alongside, then I think that develops that design mind. And now you can actually design. And then also, too, sitting alongside architects. Gosh, their minds are just, and learning from them.
Yeah, they're incredible. They have a really unique mind of how they can put stuff together in a spatial space. It's kind of 3D built in their mind. And then when they present their ideas, even as a builder that's been doing this for 17 years, I'm blown away at the process. I'm very good at visualizing things, but I love the unveiling. It's funny when we are with our clients and seeing the design, I think I'm as excited, if not more, to see what the architect's going to come back with and be like, yes. And sometimes, obviously I'm a very energetic person, so I will see their plans and the client will look at me and I'll just be like, it's all over my face, like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Yeah, I often wonder that if they were on the fence, but they saw how excited I was, like, would they actually be like, I don't really like it, but wow, he seems like really excited.
Right. And it is seeing that vision, right? Mm-hmm. And then also knowing the why. Mm-hmm. And hearing that from the architect and actually from the builder. I think that's kind of segue into my hope is always to try to be in on the first very beginning meetings of understanding what the vision is for the client, what the needs are for the client, their family needs, how they live, and then just kind of sitting back like a fly on the wall and just listening, seeing the architect build this and seeing the why behind it really helps us because I start putting in all the other things with it. Mm-hmm. And not fighting it. So, and then of course, budget, that's another conversation. Right. But we're just talking about creativity right now.
Right.
We don't need to get into
a challenge.
Budget. Yeah.
And I want to touch base on the order here in a little minute, but just to go back a little bit for the beginning, did you have a formal education in design or how did you segue into design? Or you just felt like you had a knack for it and it just kind of opened up and as you did a few, you're like, wow, I'm really talented at this. Because I can speak from experience that what attracted me to your firm and to you, like you said, there is a connection, like I trust this person. They're very competent. I know that I can trust them with our client. And then skill level was something that I just trusted because of your reputation. But ultimately, it was your organization that personally attracted me to you. Mm-hmm. We had a mutual design friend that introduced us, and she had just raved about how organized you were. And I know we're going to touch on that later in the podcast about just the challenges of order in a very chaotic field being home building. Anyway, going back to that part of the question, what was your background and your evolution into your design?
So I did attend the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. I'm not going to say what year.
That's fine.
Okay, good.
2005.
Yes. Well, maybe. Okay. Anyway. I don't need to be that young.
Right.
Okay. But, and I started in fashion. I worked for a fashion designer on 7th Avenue.
Okay.
I hated it.
Really?
Well, I just didn't. You know what? What I didn't like is, that was so last season.
Okay.
And I was like, wait a minute. I kind of like last season stuff.
It wasn't just black for everything?
Yeah, right? And so I didn't like the, I don't know. I kind of always had an affinity for antiques and older things, or also, too, an appreciation for different fashion styles. I mean, who's to say that that's out of fashion? I don't know. I'm just kind of, I mean, there are some things, okay, that we're not going to do, but I don't know. I'm just more of an organic type of person. So I really quickly said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I was approached by a professor that started this, and interior design was not even on my radar. But back then, that kind of dates me, but that's okay. Interior design education was more in my mind and a lot of people's mind for commercial design and drafting, and that just was not in my headspace. It just was not even a thought. And I was always painting my walls and I would dumpster dive. Well, you don't really have dumpsters in New York. I would street dive.
Street dive.
They would leave stuff on the sidewalks, and
Sure.
I would grab it
Yep.
and
repurpose it. And,
I would
and apply
repaint it,
yeah.
and piano bench as a coffee table, and
You were way ahead of your time. Now everyone does DIY stuff on YouTube of how to turn a picnic bench into
Oh
a
my
dining room
gosh.
table. You were
we didn't have the internet then.
right.
We didn't have cell phones. I mean, oh gosh, that
Was
really is telling.
Was there round wheels when you were around?
That's what my son says. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I just picked up books. I went to, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I was approached by a professor, and he was starting a new program. It was a Bachelor of Science in Marketing, but it was a focus on home furnishings product development. And so I immediately was excited about it. So the focus, I thought, when I graduated was I would do product development within like a Pottery Barn or a company like that, and in working in between the marketing team and the design team, and working with, like manufacturers across, in Asia or whatever, to develop these products that we're going to sell. So I learned about ceramic and tile and wood and fabric, and won a competition actually, and got a trip to Hook Celanese when microfiber came out. See,
Wow.
Someone is going to Google this, and
I don't
they'll
even know what that is.
I know they'll know how old I am.
That's amazing.
From that. So, So then I left that, but I went back to Texas. New York was great, but I didn't have family and friends there, and it's a hard city.
Yeah.
So I went back to Texas, and I still didn't have decorating or interior design on my mind. I did it on
Really?
the
After
side.
all that even?
After all that.
Because you were thinking more manufacturer, more like working within a product line of creating
Yes.
textiles and whether interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was. So there really wasn't that industry in Houston. And a friend who was a recruiter and in a recruiting firm. And so I got a job as a corporate recruiter, and I did that for a few years, and that's how I met my husband.
Yeah.
So see, that was the path.
That was the path. Well, and I'm guessing was there an entrepreneurial spirit in your family? Like
Always.
I'd be interested to hear about how you,
Always.
I know you touched on it earlier, you met a few builders and you started working and then you took your big plunge in Minneapolis here in, 2018, right?
Yeah.
So I guess how does one, tell me a little bit about the entrepreneurial family surrounding that caused you to say I'm going to start my own business and this is the reason why.
I always knew I was going to have a business.
Even early on.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
My father didn't go to college, and he started a business very young, and has a knack for growing businesses, starting businesses. Has been very successful in his life, selling businesses and in different industries. Both of my brothers and my sister are all self-employed.
Well, there you go. You've got a roadmap and a blueprint to follow. So
I know.
well done.
I think it's in the DNA. I don't know.
Interesting.
Is it independent?
Yeah.
When I moved to New York, I'd never been there and I didn't know anyone. I moved on my own. And again, let me remind you, there was no Google. There was no internet.
Right.
So you opened up a map.
Yep.
And you actually got on the phone.
And just called
and
phone
just
books.
Called.
This
Yes.
generation probably doesn't even know what a phone book is.
I know. But, it's funny. You had asked about the transfer from Texas to Minneapolis. I have to give kudos to Minneapolis. There are so many incredible craftsmen here. And the build is very different. We're ripping out carpet there. We're putting in carpet here. We don't have basements down there.
Right.
A lot of the woods are very different, so knowing the different materials and the different build styles. And for Minneapolis, I think in particular, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like it's so build driven, which it's beautiful. I love it. It's people really, they keep their homes here a long time. In Texas, it's a little bit more transient. So they invest more, I think, in their
Do you think
homes.
people in Texas are moving and staying within Texas, or it's transient the fact that people are coming to Texas for another job and then leaving the state?
Yeah, I think that both.
Okay.
I think both. I just, it's interesting, and I think that's what I love about here. It's very, I like the homegrownness, I
Yes.
guess. That fits me really well too.
I'm very biased because obviously I grew up here and surrounded by a bunch of Nordic,
Yeah.
Eastern European craftsmen. And so, of course, we think that, our craft labor is the best. But I often hear it from other states. Like, it's just an amazing amount of talented, craft-loving individuals that are in love with woodworking. And so I don't have any comparison. So one of my questions to you is, what do you see in terms of quality? And in terms of, is there something that like you could walk into a home in Texas and like that would not even make it in a starter home in Minnesota, for example? Or, is there things like that is like, wow, the craftsmanship level up here in Minnesota is so much different than Texas. And obviously this is, at this point, 8-10 years ago. So it's not to say that there's not talented people in Houston, of course. I know there's plenty of talented builders, but in general, just the talent pool. And I know our styles are different too. I would suspect up here, we're doing a lot of, very traditional home, heavy on the woods, the wainscoting, the beams. You can tell me a little bit more in Texas what kind of style is prevalent, because I'm guessing that there's plaster and other styles that would probably be more familiar, Adobe down in Texas, that would have no place maybe up here, or if so, there's so few of them that it's just not commonly seen.
Right. Well, for example, and it's weather, it's climate. You don't have to build the homes down there like you have to build here for the weather, the extreme weather.
Yep.
So, we don't have a lot of heavy casing around the windows down there. You don't have to. It's a little bit airier and lighter. I mean, it gets hot, but that's to be said. But I think also too, back then, it's hard for me to say. I mean, obviously, in some of the higher end luxury homes in Texas, they're beautiful. I mean, and the craftsmanship is there. And at that time, I was in the suburbs, so a lot of my surrounding, a lot of the projects I was doing was they were nice homes, but they weren't as custom. They weren't as custom down there. There were a couple custom projects that I worked down there. So, I think,
it because are there more spec homes down there, meaning that they're doing them as model homes and they don't know who the buyer is, versus, I don't know actually the stats up here. We're a high-end custom home builder, of course, so I actually don't do any model homes. Everything I do is specifically for a client. So because of that, they become a little bit more nuanced, very specific. And, obviously with the upcoming Parade of Homes, we'll get people that'll come through and be like, wow, that's amazing. And maybe we would have done it, maybe we wouldn't have, but likely we did it because of that client. And sometimes we get credit for that. Right. The opposite could be true too. A client could ask for something that you're like, oh, what's this going to look like? But it's their home. I'll build it for them. Right. And, it's like, okay, that's not what I would do, but it's their home and we'll stylistically make it as best as possible. But at the end of the day, there may be a reason for that. And so, we'll do it for them.
No, that's absolutely true. There's a lot of developments and developers, more so in Texas, especially I'm from Houston. So you have fast growth, you have spec homes, and they're by larger builders, and so I was going in and remodeling them, and putting in more custom things,
updating them,
sure. and putting in, and taking out niches.
Tell me, I know we've talked about this before offline, and I'd be kind of curious where this goes. Tell me a little bit about the process, and just high level is that down there, you'd kind of mentioned that people come to designers to build their homes. Mm-hmm. And up in Minnesota, just because of the strength of our building network, I think we have one of the oldest tours in the country, the Parade of Homes, and now the Artist at Home Tour and a number of others. But basically, people would come to builders, and then we'll talk about this process now. But for me, someone will come to me and they'll say, "Hey, we'd like to build a home. We love your homes, or we've seen you online." Great. They'll sit down, they interview with me, they pick us. We enter into a design agreement. Then at that point, we'll introduce them to an architect or two for them to choose between, who they feel a good fit for. And then, after a few rounds of drawings, we'll bring an interior designer. And that's kind of the process. It's not always that way. I mean, you can obviously go with architects first, but in Minnesota, there's a very strong builder first bias, if you will. Huge. Tell me about, because it's not that way in Texas, right?
No. I mean, matter of fact, I don't think my contractor brought me any business. It was 100% me. And we would have 3 new remodels a month coming in. So it was very designer driven. And I don't think that's not a negative. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard for me because I want to give back.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I know you've brought me projects, but I'm gonna
up here, you mean in Minneapolis now?
Yeah. So I'm like, so it's good that, and that's the conversation you and I had. I was like, do you get a lot of projects from designers? And it made me feel better because I felt really bad that I'm not known as much.
Bridget,
here.
You're the only one who hasn't given me a lead. No.
Hey, I've introduced you.
No, in 17 years, I mean, I'd have to think a little bit more about it, but we actually have one right now that an interior designer has given us, and we actually just signed the design contract last week, and it'll be a remodel. And so we'll kind of go from there. They're a past client of this interior designer, and so that was kind of the lead in, and so we'll take it from there. But by and large, no. I guess part of it we've been talking about remodels. I'd be curious how many shifting back to Texas. Were you part of any new homes, and how often would someone come to a designer for a new home? Because I do understand. Scope creep, right? Someone will come, I get called in for, because we do both. We do new homes and we do remodels.
Right.
And every year it's a little bit different split. So like this year it's probably 60-40 to the new homes. But let's say someone brings us in for a remodel, and kind of my golden rule on that is if you can't tell me what you're keeping, that's a teardown. Yeah. And I get a lot of people that will say, well, I want to bump out the back. I want to do a whole new main floor. I want a new kitchen. I want to add a second story. I'm like, what are you keeping? And they look at me just kind of like glassy-eyed. I'm like, yeah, that's not a remodel. That's a teardown. Yeah. And so anyway, back to the question a little bit is how many of new homes were coming through you and you brought in a builder, or are you specifically talking about remodels in Texas?
It was mostly remodels.
Okay.
I did a couple of custom homes, but they already had a builder. But I was referred to them not through the builder, but just through my network.
Sure.
So the client came directly to me. So I don't know. I can't speak for that today, but I definitely know that Minneapolis is so much more builder driven. And I think it's important also why it's important to create that relationship with the builder, but also for the clients to understand what the role of the designer is, that we're not just for finishes.
Yes.
That's a hard, so it's really important for us to come in early. And you've been so great about that because bringing us in early really builds that trust with the client. And then we all know each other's roles. And I bounce ideas off of, and I'll call the architect. I mean, and say, hey, what was your intention here? I don't want to, mess up the lighting or whatever when we're doing a lighting plan. And I love that collaboration with them on the beginning. But a lot of clients don't understand that. Mm-hmm. They think of designers as just, we're going to pick out pretty things.
It's interesting because early on in my career, I benefited. My dad was a builder. My mom was an interior designer, a decorator. Yeah. I was laughing because I have little kids, and my sister, who was little at the time, could not say D's, and so she would call my mom a wreck-orator. And I think Dad said it, but sometimes he'd be like, yeah, that's pretty true. She definitely wrecked my idea on this. But, they were a dynamic duo. It worked out really well. Yeah. Dad did the building. My mom did all the interior design, and, they had a great career. And I think a big part of it later on, my dad would say that, a big part of his success was just how great Mom was at interior design, especially back then. They were building in the 70s and 80s, and interior design is nothing like it is, today. And now with Instagram and YouTube and all these, amazing outlets for design ideas, I think the big challenge now for you and I is people will come in and show us all these pictures. And I know architects struggle with this in particular, is how do you create original thought? And I do like pictures for the initial concept of like, give me an idea of what you're trying to do so that I can early on decipher, like, is this a good fit for us? If their budget is $700,000 and they're showing me pictures of a $3 million home, we need to have that conversation day one. Yeah. Otherwise, everyone's going to be disappointed. So pictures have their place. But do you feel like pictures sometimes stymie the creativity that you would like to demonstrate?
I do. And again, there has, going back to, it's both, right? Time is money. We have to spend that time with them because they have to trust. They've only seen pictures and maybe they haven't traveled. They haven't seen some other ideas. So when we can get in early and then take the time to build that trust with the client, then we can really start bringing in other ideas. And I'm always telling them color outside the lines. We don't want to copy. You want to be different. So, that it is a challenge. I mean, it's good and bad, right? I mean, it's good because it's hard to speak design, to the words. Like you can say modern or you can say traditional. Yeah. Well, it's just hard to put words to it. So pictures are great.
It's like saying ice cream. Well, what flavor?
I know, exactly. Yeah. And it's dating me again. But I would have folders of magazine clippings. And
I used to actually do the same thing early on.
I would just, folders of traditional and transitional and then what this is. And it's, and I would pull them out and I would make copies of them and put it in the client file. So now it's just like I was clipping before.
Personally,
a real thing.
I still like this the best. If I was designing a home for myself, or if a client was to say, Mark, how would you like to design? I would say, give me 4 pictures and that's it. But they need to be hero shots. I mean, they can't be, I always ask people, when they do their sorting of their photos, scale it on a scale from 0 to 10. If it's below a 6, like chuck it, I don't want to see it again. And, I'm really looking for 9s and 10s, not that there isn't specific ideas that we need to react to, but for overall concept, I need about, I could do it off of 2 or 3 pictures because you and I are quick studies. We've done this for a long time, assuming that the pictures are, synergetic with each other, if you will. Because sometimes you'll get a modern home and you'll get like a traditional home, and then you'll get like some, and like, whoa, okay, this one is a lot trickier because it's not as congruent together. So I just feel like now I know like the soul of that house. Like I know the essence of what you want it to be. Let us do our work. But it's an amazing client that allows us to do that. Because they want to control the process, or they feel like the process is too big and too out of control. And so they feel, unless they're willing to trust us. I mean, the best relationship, and we had an amazing client recently, you and I together, she allowed us to do what we do best. And she gave us a lot of free reign. And that house is one of the best homes that I've ever been a part of, not only for the process. The client was happier, I can tell you for sure. Our subs and our trade partners and the overall effect when it was done. And of course, everything that you did to make it amazing. And as a collaboration now, because we just did our photo shoot on it with you, you're like, wow, that's incredible.
Well, and I have to say, it was the best process for us. There was hardly, in 2.5 years, hardly a day of stress. Your team, the communication, everybody was so willing. I mean, just to answer our calls, to answer some questions that we had, because we do. I mean, and vulnerability is key. You can't, walk in a place and think that you have all the answers. And yes, the client. I mean, my gosh. I think it's the projects that are not successful are the clients that do not allow the process.
I agree.
And it's the same. You can talk to, but any business is like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you're your best patient if you can speak and communicate what your needs are and what the ailments are, right,
Mm-hmm.
to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But allow that process, and then of course, have questions, and get maybe a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I think you're right. The people that have had the most trouble with the process, which makes a big part of my job, is making sure that the journey is enjoyable on top of this incredible home, which we'll produce for you almost regardless. But you want the journey to be enjoyable as well.
Yeah.
And I think the ones that get into the most trouble is they stop trusting their team. Yeah. And they start bringing in 7 or 8 other people's opinions or voices.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, it's insecurity that is, it's either trust or insecurity.
Yeah.
It's one of those two things. And it's once you've lost that trust, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get back, because for whatever reason that person, and it could be just a personality trait of that person, they need the reassurances. And I think that's a big part of it. And anyway,
I always say, okay, we're going to have to walk them off the ledge again today. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I do that. And I actually don't mind that.
Mm-hmm.
I play psychologist.
Yeah.
I don't mind it as long as they're willing. And I love it. The clients will even contact me. Do you think we should do that? I mean, on the littlest thing. And I love that. And I don't mind that when they get scared or they get nervous, because I understand it. And I can relate to it. I think also too, it's our job to set up the expectations and say, hey, look, there's going to be a 7th inning stretch. You're going to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I know you really like us now. You're going to get really tired of us.
Yep.
So we're going to try our best. But when you do, and when there's frustration, just call me. We'll work it out. There's going to be things. And it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And also taking off that stress, and this kind of goes to the process. I know it's hard to not talk about that. But having that detailed process in front of him saying, we're going to select this first, and then this second, and this third. But we have the overall vision. Mm-hmm. So it's like, even if I'm doing a small little bedroom, okay, just a small bedroom, we don't piecemeal anything. You have to, when you get in the car, you know your destination.
That's a very good analogy.
I mean, you have to. And so I'm like, even if you're not going to buy everything today, at least you know what you're going to buy. And you know what color and what direction and what size and scale and feel. And it calms them because they have a plan. Mm-hmm. I think when all of these thoughts are going through their head, they just get nervous. And when they know that they have a team that's going to listen to them, but also lay out that plan and then execute it well. And give enough time to selection to where you're not stressful going, okay, look, we still have some time to pick out countertops, but I wanted to start with this first. But okay, that's a good thing, but let's, we still have time. It relaxes them. But I'm going to get on, over 13 years, there's one trait that almost every single time it never works out. And it is the person that wants to create a home or build a home for someone else or for their image or not for themselves.
The keeping up with the Joneses mentality?
It's a really hard thing because you're not designing for them. And so you don't really get to know the core of who they are. And the goal always changes because we go down a path and they go, oh my gosh, I went to someone's house and I saw this. And then it's completely different. And I'm like, okay. Well, then so that's really hard. And while I appreciate that and I understand it, it's almost impossible. You're chasing just a ghost. So
that's very well said. We have one that we have been with for quite a while, and that's you've explained it exactly. And I think at the end of the day, the team is stressed out, the designers on that project are stressed out, and the client. I mean, I'm empathetic towards their journey as well.
Right.
And unfortunately, there's nothing we can really do about it because that's a choice that they're making. But it doesn't yield the best home. And like you said, the goalpost keeps moving, and
Yeah.
the client's stressed out, the builder, the whole team is. It's a very difficult process.
Because no one has a destination.
Right.
And so it didn't happen very often. I think
No.
most people, and we don't want to take every project, right? And I mean, not every fit. And I'm fine with that. I don't take it personally. It is really, it's a win-win when it's a fit, because we just want that. We want that success.
Just like we mentioned earlier in the podcast, where I'll have you after they've chosen us as the builder, and I'll bring in let's say an architect or two for them to interview, and same with interior design group. And a lot of it is me. Why do I pitch one design group over another? Well, it's personality fit. There are certain people, as I've gotten to know you, I'm like, okay, they'd be perfect with Bridget and your team. And other people, you're like, oh, that person might be better with that person. And so that's a judgment call that I have to read the room and read the person. But even for myself, there are times when I sit down with people and I'll say, you're interviewing other builders, and that's fine. But pick someone you want to spend some time with. Like on this new home, the one that you and I worked on, it's a 3-year creation, a year in design, and a year and a half, let's call it 2 years, to completion. And it was great experience for all of us. Yeah. But you just spent 3 years with someone. That's a long time. This is not like going and buying a couch off the floor, or that's a transaction. And we are not. I don't want to be in the transaction business.
No,
I enjoy the relationship. I
do too.
have said many times I don't want the company to get too big, because I enjoy people. And, if I lose touch with spending time with our clients and with our team, then that's not really what my skill set is set up for. But I'm kind of missing out on the heart and soul of the build. And I do enjoy that. Yeah.
I know you do. And I think that's why that collaboration was so great. It goes into hiring too.
Yeah, tell me about that. I know we've talked a little bit about hiring. You have a team of 3 right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
And when you first started, did you immediately hire someone, or were you solo as you cold called and tried to find builders? Walk me through how you've evolved your A, company culture, and B, the people that you do have, and where is it succeeding and where is it failing, and how do you change that?
Well, I failed at first. I mean,
classic entrepreneur story.
Well, I mean, we have to fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way to success.
Yep, I agree.
We have to allow ourselves and everybody else around us to fail, because that's how you learn. But I didn't. It wasn't that the people I hired were bad. It just wasn't a right fit for them or for me. But I also didn't know what I needed.
Yeah.
Because being new here. So my story is a little bit different, because I was so new here, didn't have a lot. But I think for hiring now that I know, I really, first of all, I laid out, like you, I want to stay fairly small. I don't want to grow to this ginormous hiring tons of designers. I really don't. That's not, I like to stay in and involved. But I think the most important thing was not only finding the right culture and the right value person, that with the similar values, the ethics, the work ethic. You can't train that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just can't. It's not trainable.
So that's what you hire, and then you train the process?
I do. I mean, they have to have the skill set too,
mm-hmm.
And I want them to have skill set where I don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, because you're complementing each other.
Absolutely. So bigger and better than I am. And it doesn't scare me. I love that. I mean, and I give accolades to my employees. Mm-hmm. And I have a couple that are just dynamic. I mean, and I love to compliment them in front of other people.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't assume that they don't know. So I give them challenges. But I also tell them, okay, you can do this, but I'm going to be your support. Mm-hmm. So you call me, don't assume, ask questions. So actually, as a business owner, you become the support person for your staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think more than anything. I mean, it's like kind of having kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to know that you have their back.
Mm-hmm.
And then, making sure that they're going to treat your clients and have that same, and your colleagues and the vendors and
mm-hmm.
everybody else the same. Because it's just, I cannot, if there's not a fit with a client and one of my designers, which that just hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it did happen once with someone previously that I'd hired, but that doesn't happen now.
Mm-hmm.
But there also is that too. I'll meet with the client and then I'll say, which one is going to be the best for them? You know, clients that are extremely particular, that will have every question in the book, and they have their measuring tape out, and they double, triple measure. I know which designer is going to be fine with that, and they're great at fielding those calls and answering that. So I think it's again, it has to do with that hiring, but I love my staff. We have so much fun.
Yeah, no, I can tell. I mean, it shows up in your work, and obviously just the ease at which you're with each other. I mean, it's really neat. We have a small team too, right? We have 5 people. And so, you know, and there's not that there's not dynamic. And it's interesting because just yesterday, actually, I spent probably an hour and a half, you know, kind of moderating between someone who's older than me and someone who's younger than me. And so I guess because I have 3 children, it's kind of like you feel very parental. You're like, okay,
you do.
All right, little one, I understand. Okay, you need to calm down. And so you end up, I think a big part, something that nobody tells you when you start a business, is that a large portion of your time is, you know, if your craft is building a home, let's say, and you obviously need to know what you're doing and how to build a home. But, you know, ultimately you surround yourself, as you've said, with people on your team that can either do what you can't do or do it better than you can. I've heard recently that if you can find somebody that can do your job to 60% efficiency, hire them. And now they can't stay at 60%, but they'll increase. I found that really interesting and kind of eye-opening. And I got to think of it like sometimes I'll get, you know, discouraged by, you know, an employee's performance on something. But then if I was to ask myself that question, are they at least doing 60% of it? Oh yeah, they're way higher than that. They're like 80 or 90%. They're only missing a few small things. And yet it's, you know, it's easier to be critical of someone else's work than it is of your own. And so if you look in the mirror and say, well, okay, I know I'm making mistakes too, but, you know, are they, you know, do they tell me too? Am I being held accountable? And you want to have you mentioned earlier about culture, just how do you promote that so that everyone has an equal voice regardless of their seniority or skill level? I want people to feel comfortable, because if people aren't comfortable, you mentioned the word vulnerable. If you're not open with each other, you can't have good company chemistry. You just can't. You
can't. And I remember one of them, the first thing they did, they broke a table, and they felt so bad. I mean, I was like, are you okay?
Yeah.
It's a table.
Right.
You know, and that I don't want them to spend their energy on things that are not going to matter.
Right.
And they have a safe place. I also give them flexibility. I have one that's super independent. Mary is very independent. And I love that. I delegate all the time. And I love her independence because I'm very independent. So, and she appreciates that. So you have to give, you know, it's not always just about money, you know? I mean, there's just different compensation. And people have different needs at different times in their careers. So understanding that and what their goals are, and circling back, I use assessment solutions to kind of do a 360. I haven't done it yet this year. I want to do it. And it really gives feedback from their perspective, and they rate you as the boss.
I like that.
Yeah, it's for my recruiting years.
You have to send that to me. I'd be very interested. I love personality tests and sort of feedback. I'm very intrigued by what it yields. I don't always know what to do with that information, but I do like that.
You can have someone facilitate that, but at least you have the knowledge, and you can maybe get better at it. And then you know where to coach yourself as a leader. Because
as a fellow business owner, I asked myself the question the other day, you know, just obviously building over the last 2 years has been very challenging. And it's not just COVID. It's like even out of COVID right now, the production is very well publicized. It's an absolute nightmare. But, you know, I often ask myself as we're struggling or as we're, you know, experiencing growing pains or whatever it is, like I just recently, it's taken me a long time to figure, like, is it my fault? Is it because as the leader of the company, do I have the wrong team member, the wrong trade partner, or do we have the wrong leadership? And that comes back to me. Right. And so I've kind of blocked out time in my schedule now to spend a little bit more time thinking about the business. You know, we're so busy building the house or having meetings or thinking about this. And I think actually spending some time and just stopping, for me, I have to time block. I block it out. I do a 2-hour window and, you know, whatever it is that I need to work on. And that's my window to be free of distractions as the best of my ability and to focus on that. And I'm not very good at it. It's something that I need to do a better job of. With that in mind, if you could go back to the beginning, what are some things that you would tell a young Bridget Chirigos about your future? Like what skills or what assets do you wish you would have trained yourself for? None of us can go back, of course, and redo history, but what do you think that would have helped you greatly as an entrepreneur and in the interior design world?
I wish I would have had, I don't know. I have no regrets, and I know everything is about timing. Everything is about timing. My faith has gotten huge in the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big part. I don't let fear
Mm-hmm.
overtake me. Of course, we all feel fearful, right?
Yep.
Um,
It's a natural emotion.
yeah, but I don't let it drive my decisions anymore.
That's wise.
And I
Yeah.
did younger, and I would switch or question myself, like you're saying, or question this or question that. And I think, getting the data and the information and studying and analyzing that and just kind of sitting back and I think it's because, you get older and you kind of go, okay, there's not a whole lot of time. Time is, you don't get that back.
Mm-mm.
So I think now when it comes to decisions, when in doubt, I don't. And I either wait for the decision to be made or to come to me, or I reach out and ask questions. But I think that's the biggest thing. And keeping things simple.
Mm-hmm.
I think in our minds as creative entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
how many businesses have I created in my mind? And,
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, let's do this.
Right.
And I have to be careful to not say everything out loud that's
Right.
in my head, because my staff goes, okay, does she want me to do that? Does she
Right.
not want me to do that?
That must be, it's interesting. I'll ask more entrepreneurs that question because I have a feeling that that's the entrepreneur's mindset.
It's
Like,
really hard.
I exercise a lot, but when I'm running and my mind is free flowing is usually when I call my PMs or, I'll
Yep.
call random people that I, network with, and I'll be like, hey, what do you think of this idea? And they're like, are you running right now? I'm like, yeah, as I'm breathing. And I'm like, okay. And they'll, luckily I have very patient friends because
I know.
it's unusual, I'm sure, for people to do that. And so, but I'm constantly thinking of ideas and, ultimately you rein it in. And I think that enthusiasm, keeps on essentially breeding new ideas and new life into your current business. I mean, we all know that if your business stayed stagnant, it could not survive.
Right.
You need to evolve, whether it's, media presence or whatever's kind of latest and greatest. It doesn't always you don't have to be on the cutting edge of it, but you have to evolve. If you don't evolve, I mean, history is full of businesses that failed because they
Absolutely.
didn't evolve. I think of,
Right.
I think like, was it BlackBerry or Palm Pilot? I think they had like 90% of the world's market.
Yeah.
And then within just like a couple of years, they
Gone.
went out of business.
I know.
And so I often think about that. Like, what do we need to do as, builder and interior designers to evolve to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the clients, but we still want to be here for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long we want our careers to last and however long the public wants us to last.
Well, I think it's interesting because my father, first of all, I wanted my husband and my father being my backbone and my rocks to help me and guide me. And my father's experiences is just, I couldn't be what I am today without listening to him. So I'm really open to that. But one of the things I think we have to be careful of too, because I definitely know the innovativeness and always creative and making changes. But one thing that is really pressed lately in the last couple of years, especially after COVID, is just doing what you do every day great and focusing on what you're doing, because sometimes with the creative mind you're always on to the next, and you're not realizing that it's the success is in the little things that we do and the day-to-day tasks that we do all the time. And as entrepreneurs and as creative visionaries, it's really hard to get excited about the same thing over and over again. But that's what makes that success. So it's constantly balancing that too. And having that staff that doesn't mind doing that. You can't have your whole staff being the creative leaders, right? What are they called? The plotters. I mean,
block and tackling in football.
Exactly. I mean, they're there. They like that process. It's like the difference between, yes. And it's the difference between, a plumber and then, an artist. I mean, it's just, it's a different art. But they have to have that methodical process, and you have to have them. So there's this whole holistic thing that has to happen to keep something successful. So I think for me, staying that groundedness and appreciating the every moment, even if it's the little things like walking a client off the edge. Again, talking, because I repeat myself constantly. We have to remember that clients don't know this stuff. And, so we have to.
That's good to remember. I mean, just like anything, you get used to it, and you
do.
don't want to be patronizing. So you don't want to so I think a lot of it is your tone of delivery, how you explain it to people. Yeah. Hey, this is how we do it. This is why. And realizing that, I think anytime we've had an issue where you've made an assumption, the client would say, well, I didn't know that. And you're like, okay,
right.
I need to realize that this is not common knowledge, even though you feel like it's common knowledge to you, and then explain it. Yeah. One last thing here in closing, you just mentioned that the last couple of years, your faith has helped you remove fear. It reminds me of a verse that comes to mind. I can't remember if it's in Proverbs or Psalms, but it just says, perfect love casteth out fear. Tell me a little bit about that, of how did fear maybe shape you, and how has it, how have you dealt with it now? Like, what does that mean when you say your faith has grown? Like, how does that help you in your business?
Gosh. Okay.
Or is that a whole nother podcast?
Yeah, it could be. I think I would love that to talk more about that. But I think of God as my CEO, and it keeps me humble, keeps me grounded. And it, it goes beyond what we see out in the world. So I think it's that combination, like we're in the world, not of the world. Yes. For me. So for me, I'm in the world, and I need to, stay agile and innovative and be the best. But really, my strength and the faith comes from Him, and He, He creates the day. So I've gotten into a huge deep dive study. I've been studying the Bible and I just now got out of Genesis. I'm in a Bible study after a year and a half. So I'm really in a deep dive.
You've been a year and a half in Genesis?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. Our studies actually happen to be in Genesis right now as well. I think we're on chapter 32, but it's one a week. A year and a half. That's incredible.
Yeah. So, well, it's a bunch of girls, so we have to dig a little deeper, and I'm sure we get off topic. So, but I love it. I think the knowledge from, and I'm gonna plug this gentleman. His name is Les Feldick, and his recordings are from 1991, and he's a rancher from Oklahoma. He's not he didn't go to seminary. He's just he just reminds me of Paul. But anyway, I just love because I know more. It's like, it's not just having great relationships or going to church or praying, but it's also learning. It's it's a threefold, just like in anything in life. You can't just be isolated from it. So I'm constantly open. But I think it's that vulnerability. I think, look, it was pretty scary to start a business here and not know if I was going to be successful. And then the pandemic came. Right. And all of us.
Yeah, everyone for those couple of months. It's funny now to look back, right, and think of like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Or I remember going to the grocery store and seeing people run down the aisles, and you're like, whoa, what is happening here? And now it seems laughable, but at the time you're like, wow, this is very erratic behavior.
Yeah, it is. So I think that from that, and I hope I think a lot of people from something, like I always say, adversity can come an advantage, but you have to take care of it. You have to look for that advantage.
Well, I cannot believe it. It's already been an hour. I would love to have you on again, and we certainly will. Thank you very much for coming on. Where can our guests find you?
Well, you can find us at chirigosdesigns.com. Oh, gosh, let me spell that for you. CHIRIGOS designs.com. or designbarmn.com. We're in Deep Haven, and or find us through Mark Williams. Custom Homes.
That's great. We'll also have we'll have all your links in our show notes as well, so you can certainly click below there. Thank you very much for your time and for coming on. You've been a great person and a great guest. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on this podcast.
Oh, thank you very much.